I think we're live.
We're live, and I missed that second bing. Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Wendy Walsh, and it must be Wednesday because I've got my glass of wine. So it's Wine with Dr. Wendy. I have a great show for you tonight. Tonight is Becoming Women, teaching daughters about sexuality. And I should say before I introduce my guest that I did get some tweets today from people saying, we should be talking about boys. Well, you know what? We did talk about boys last week, and maybe you missed it, but it is streaming on my website and on YouTube, so you can find out how to talk to boys about sexuality, too. All right, let me introduce my guest, Emma Johnson in New York City. Hi, Emma, from WealthySingleMommy.com. And I found you because you wrote one of my favorite blogs, 8 Reasons Why I Want My Daughter to Date When She Wants. We also joining us, we have Amy Lang in Seattle from birdsandbeesandkids.com, and she already told me I'm not supposed to let my 11-year-old have Snapchat, by the way, so she's got lots of good information for us, and get ready. My intrepid producer, Laura Hampikian in Boise, Idaho, and I'm Dr. Wendy with my wine in Los Angeles at the beach, because that's what we do here. We drink and have a great life in the sun while we're waiting for the big earthquake to the rest of you all. Okay, so let me start off with Amy. We're going to go right into it. When's the age? That's always the big question. When's the age to start talking about sex?
That would be way, way, way sooner than anybody ever anticipates. 5 is the ideal time to start the conversation.
And what should the conversation say?
It should basically be about how babies are made and that sex is not for kids and talking about body parts and all that good stuff. And when we start sooner, it's easier on everybody, especially you. Frankly, the kids are not, they're super open, they are curious. We're the ones that show up with all this freak out about it because we know what sex is. We've had it. We live in this world that's saturated with sex, as I know you well know, Dr. Wendy.
And we have issues around it that they don't have. So I think I want to add also that besides the words, you want to be really careful about your meta communication, being just sort of open and smart and relaxed and confident about this. When you describe a vulva, it's the same as an elbow. It's just a body part, all right? Okay, so that's a good advice. I had the good fortune myself of being pregnant and having a 4-year-old ask me, Mommy, how did the baby get in there? So it was a good opportunity for me to have that conversation right away. Okay, so your blog, Emma, is called 8 Reasons Why I Want My Daughter to Date When She Wants. How do you know when she wants?
When she's expressing it, when she's showing interest in boys, when she's talking about dating, when she's starting to express her sexuality. That's when she's thinking about it. That's when her body's telling her, sending her sexual signals. The impetus for this blog, I was at a family party, and this mom who's, you know, in a very affluent New York suburb and is very interested in her child's academic career, was going on very flippantly about how her daughter was, I think, 16 years old, and she had this very stern talk with her daughter about how she wanted her to wait until she was out of high school to date. And to me, that was just blasphemous. I mean, this young woman seemed like she was a great kid, expressing total natural instincts in the opposite sex, and her mother was squashing them and telling her daughter, you must, as a family rule, you must put that on hold in lieu of your academic and professional career, and that is the bottom line. And she said it like it was normal.
And I think you'll agree with me, Amy, that what we're doing here is as soon as you stop the line of communication or as soon as you stop the road by putting in a block that way, then it will happen on its own anyway. Right, Emma?
Well, that's the thing. It is embracing the natural. I mean, we're being told 5 years old. That's great. My kids were asking questions much, much earlier. And I think, though, the piece of the puzzle that's missing here is that we're not talking about our own feelings about our own sexuality, because that's going to guide us. And there is no message in society that embraces or encourages mothers' sexuality. There's a total disconnect. There's nothing out there embracing those two things coming together in the same woman. And I've explored that myself because I happened to be becoming a single woman at the same time I was becoming a mother. So it is a very dangerous area that most adults, I don't really feel like are very comfortable with their own sexuality, and that's why this is such dangerous territory to help guide our own children.
It's like we have our own internalized whore Madonna syndrome, and we don't know how to integrate it.
That's a good way to describe it.
It is.
That's right.
And I think that when when you say to your kid, no, you can't date, that's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. She's going to go sneak around. And I think that the answer is to keep those lines of communication open and to make sure your kid's really ready for what that means to be dating. Like, I'm pretty sure, Emma, you're not going to let your daughter date when she's 7 and she's boy crazy.
No, there's dating, but there's not. There's dating, but there's also not squashing her expression of that interest. Right.
Like encouraging that. Like what do you like about boys? Why do you like what talking about the crushing? So they understand that men can be friends as well as lovers. Maybe not at 7. But
yeah, this is something we talked about last week when we were talking about educating boys about sexuality. First of all, the conversation with boys rarely happens, and all the pressure is to have the conversation with girls because, of course, the risks of sex are much higher for women biologically than they are for men. But it's got to be more than a plumbing lesson, right? I mean, how can you add the emotional piece, Amy? What would you say?
Well, I think the easiest way to add the emotional piece just in these early conversations with girls and with boys, I think everybody needs the same information, is to talk about what things are. Like what I often say is you talk about the facts, like what things are, how they work, and your values about it. And usually in tagging on your values, you're going to talk about the emotional and social components of whatever that particular issue is. And we are really confused about our sexual values because we don't talk about sex. We don't talk about sex with our partners. We don't talk about sex with our girlfriends in a real meaningful way. So here we are faced with these little people that we're trying to grow into whole, healthy, happy adults, and we can hardly, talk about what our opinions about, oral sex is, or like, dating, or how old should a person be when they have sex for the first time. That stumps parents.
One of the things I do, because I have access to such a wealth of statistics, is rather than me putting my stuff on them, I talk about what's sort of normal in our culture or what happens. So I say things like, 80% of Americans have sex for the first time by their 20th birthday. However, 25% of Americans graduate college as virgins for all kinds of reasons, religion being the third most common cited reason. Often the first reason is that they want to put their education and career before sex. But you'll make a decision on which group you're going to fall into, but these are all the options available to you. And that makes it
interesting, though, Dr. Wendy, because the way you phrased that was pitting sex against career and education, which I don't plan to do with my children. I think that you can have a very happy, healthy sex life that might even fuel a wonderful academic and professional career. I don't think those are opposite.
I'm only quoting those people who cite that in the studies that that's their reason. That's not. I'm certainly not personally saying, oh, if you're having sex, you're not going to have a great career.
That's what I just got out of that message, mercifully.
But I think there's a lot of conflicting messages around sexuality anyway, and the big question that I have for both of you is, how do you feel about talking about your sexual past to your kids? Because that's what they'll ask about. How old were you, Mom? And what did you do, Mom?
I was a late bloomer, so I'm good.
I was a later bloomer, and people ask me this question all the time. And so here's the deal: you have to figure out what you're willing to reveal. And here's the deal: kids have great BS detectors, and my rule of thumb is no lying. So if you say, I was married, and you're lying, or I was 30, and you're lying, your kids are going to know. So figure out how you can talk about your story. And my story is that I was 1 month from 18. I thought, considering the average age of sexual debut is somewhere around 15, 16, I thought I did pretty well. Was I in love? No. Did the person I picked the person, I got it out of the way. I'm not thrilled about that. I mean, I think of and talk about this a lot. So you have to figure out, what are you going to say that's not lying? And the thing we know about kids, when they ask that question, oftentimes, especially when they're in adolescence, oftentimes what they're really asking, and Wendy, you can back me up on this, is, when is it okay for me to have sex?
Of course. That's really what they're asking. And you can even turn that question around. If you happen to be a parent out there for all those reasons who may have had sex early and regret it, you may have had sex early and don't regret it, but if you've had sex early and you regret it and you don't want your child to follow that path because of your experiences, it's perfectly okay to turn the question around and say, I think you're wondering what it would be a good age for you. By the way, speaking of this lying to kids, you know, my mother was a 30-year-old Catholic virgin when she got married because that's what she told me my entire life. And did you know that just a few months ago, I found a brother that was born in 1948 and handed to the nuns? Interesting.
Dr. Wendy, I actually have a question coming in about that.
Yes.
How can we teach girls conservative values, like to wait until marriage, but how can we teach them that and do it in a sex positive way?
Well, that's excellent. Excellent question, because in my book, The 30-Day Love Detox, I interviewed everything from, you know, women who were very sexual early and, you know, could easily separate sex from love and enjoy, you know, were protective but enjoyed their sex life, all the way to virgins who waited till marriage and born-again virgins, those who entered the hookup culture through peer pressure and then felt, oh, this isn't for me, and started over again. And I think the main thing is to express that sex is an expression of love. And those people who tend to have conservative values tend to feel more comfortable combining feelings with sex. In other words, the lesson is all about feelings and love and sex. Now, I just want to break this down a little bit. Since we're pulling this word conservative out, we should also pull out the other word, that L word, liberal, right? Mm-hmm. So just so you understand statistically, people who say they're conservative or from the red states tend to have sex earlier, but it's always they tend to marry earlier because sex is part of marriage for them. So be prepared. If you're going to tell your child, your daughter, that she should wait until marriage, start saving for that wedding because it may happen sooner than you think. In fact, in conservative communities, they still very comfortably use the word premarital sex. In other words, sex is something connected to marriage. Now, liberals tend to have sex for sex's sake or for love's sake and get married later. As a result, liberals have fewer divorces. It's not that they pick better mates or they have better marriages. It's just there's not as many years because conservatives tend to have more marriages and more divorces because sex and marriage tend to be connected. So understanding this social landscape can help explain to your child what you want them to do. And I think the other thing is, and would you ladies agree with me? And in fact, Emma, let me ask you this. It's about imparting your values more than just rules and regulations, right?
My values, but making my kids think it's their idea.
That's a good one. How do you do that?
Well, I think I am extremely open-minded about many, many things, including sex and sexuality. But it's but it's having that right. It's having them understand deeply what we're talking about, opposed to just abiding by rules. And I really liked what Amy was saying about the no BS detector that kids have. I mean, I swear by that. Yeah. And I think another great parenting rule is being vulnerable. I mean, it's, you know, if you feel like you made mistakes in your sex life, share that and share your remorse, because I feel like that is the thing.
I'm just chiming in to a degree, because kids do not want to hear about their parents' sex lives.
Well, that is just gross.
So, you don't want to hear about it, but I think that there's something to be said about being very authentic, and if you want to make sure that your kids are not repeating your mistakes, so let's say you had unprotected sex, or you had sex with the wrong person, or under wrong circumstances, don't hide from that. I think that is the greatest, possibly the greatest guide that you can use to help guide your children on a path that you would agree with.
Well, I only sort of agree with you on that, because I do think that sometimes being vulnerable and being honest means helping a child feel secure by staying their parent, not their friend. And sometimes that may mean, you know, I'm honest and vulnerable by saying this. I don't feel comfortable giving you the answer to that question because there are some things I did I wouldn't want you to see that it's giving you permission to do it because I want to protect you.
I haven't thought about that. So I agree with you to an extent. When you say I don't want, so first of all, we know from looking at studies of kids that generally speaking, if a parent made a choice in their youth and they talk about it, kids generally don't follow in their parents' footsteps. So if I had sex at 14, which I didn't, and I say to my kid, I had sex at 14, I turned out fine.
Yeah.
He's not going to go off and have sex at 14. If I said to my kid, I had sex at 14, and here's the deal. I made a mistake. I was too young. I don't know what the bleep I would have done if I had gotten pregnant. The boy I was with, he was 15. It was crazy. I mean, I would not want that choice for you. What I hope for you is, and then you can be vulnerable and honest, not super detaily, and then also say what I hope for you is, because we know that when kids hear our expectations and our hopes for them, they do better, rather than saying, hey, you go for it, be safe, which is a liberal role. That's a liberal rollout with sex. It's like, hey, sex is awesome, you need to be safe, good luck with that. So the biggest key to all of this, liberal, conservative, wherever you land, it's lots and lots of communication, and as kids get older, lots and lots of listening and reflective listening. Like,
I think there's a difference between, here's some condoms, go ahead, listen to your body, when you're ready, just go for it. One extreme, liberal, and the other is, don't you dare have sex until you graduate high school or until you're married, right? But I think in between, parents don't have to bleed. Parents can still be parents and be a trusted authority on many things, and not have to be, and vulnerability can mean having boundaries with children, and saying, you know, I actually don't want to share that with you, but also here's what I hope for you.
Yes, that's perfect. Like, I'm not comfortable talking about that. It's a really private part of my life. Let's just say I made some mistakes, and then what I hope for you is, like, you can be very clear and simple, but that when you say I don't want to talk about that, it is a little shove back to your kid. So you got to find a way to have boundaries, kind and firm, right?
Yeah,
kind and firm,
and also give them the information they really want. They don't, as you said, they don't want to know that you were given blowjobs in middle school. Okay, they want to know what is going to be right for them and what should feel good. Yeah. Okay, so we've gently had the plumbing lesson, and we're starting to talk about feelings and connecting feelings. I just want to tell the parents out there listening about some research that I found that I love. It's some of my favorite study called the Passion Turning Point Study. And this was a study not of kids or teenagers, but young adults, college students. And what they discovered is that if two things happen before the onset of a sexual relationship, that onset of sex became a positive turning point, making the relationship more secure and both people more happy. But if these two things didn't happen, more often the first sex became one that involved apologies and regret. And the two things are a discussion about what's going to happen after. In other words, exclusivity or not. What is this? Because two people go into it with different expectations. And the other thing is an expression of feelings. Now, obviously, if you've been seeing somebody for only a short period of time and you're not sure that this really is love, even saying, I really, really like you, shows that you know how to connect feelings with sex. And you can also talk about your feelings. So these two things are very important, and that's what I've taught my daughters, is that, you know, express feelings and ask about sexual exclusivity or not, or what is this sex? What does it mean to this relationship? Anything else you ladies can add to it? Emma?
I think that's really great advice. And keep in mind my kids are 4 and 6, so I personally have not crossed that bridge.
I have a 16-year-old having her first party this Friday without supervision. I'll be next door. I'm not going to be far with texting them. But I think that's an important thing. And Amy, what are the other bits of advice that you can give parents in having this discussion, besides start early?
Yeah. So start early, and then I think for girls in particular, we really need to stress that sex should feel good. Sex and sexual activity, it should feel good. It should feel good to your body. It should feel good to your heart. It should feel good to your head. It should feel good to your soul. It should feel good. So when you're engaging in sexual activity with somebody, if all those things are aligned, then that's an internal thumbs up for you to go ahead and make out with that super cute boy that you met at a party. And then I love those 2 tips that you just, I want to see that study, so I'm excited to look at that.
The study, the author of the study is Sandra Metz. I can't remember which university she's from, but I'll get it to you.
Okay, good. I'm gonna make notes when we're done. So this real clear message that sex should feel good, and that it is really fundamentally important that girls in particular know and understand what feels good to their bodies. I'm a super fan of masturbation. I believe every girl should be encouraged to masturbate, to explore her own body, because if she knows what makes her tick, then I have a guest star.
How does a mother say, honey, go masturbate, you'll love it?
So You don't say that, exactly. So lots of kids, girls, figure out really early on it feels good to touch their clitoris. So that's like rock and roll, like yay, life skill, right? So if you've got a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old that's worked out that it feels good to rub or whatever they call it, they oftentimes have names for it, then the parent's job is to say, hey, feels good when you touch your privates. So you know what? Here's the deal. That's something people do in private when they're alone. You go and have fun. Something you do in private alone. Everyone messing around. No one should touch your private, right? So if you're not lucky,
it has happened like 400 times at my house.
Yeah. Yay! Lucky you.
For both genders. Yeah.
Yay.
So it's about no negative messages early on.
Right, yeah. So, and then with your older child, you know, one of the best places to talk to your kids is in the car. You're driving down the road, and you can just toss over your shoulder to your 9 or 10-year-old, hey, have you ever heard the word masturbation before? Do you know what it is? Well, here's the deal. There's this wonderful little part of your vulva called the clitoris. It feels really good when you touch it. It's called masturbation. Lots of people, almost everybody masturbates. It's really important.
This is something you would bring up, or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We are initiators we are steering the ship. We don't wait for our kids to ask questions. We are initiating the conversations.
Really? I let everything be child-led when I hear the questions. But mind you, I have a super open family, and from the beginning, I've given them every kind of information, so they're not afraid to ask me anything.
Right, right. So, but the old school rule is you wait for your kid to ask. That's total disaster, because in this day and age, considering the amount and kind of information that comes at our kids, if we're hanging around waiting, they're going to know what a blowjob is when they're 9 or 8 or 7, and we're not going to be the ones that talk to them about how that's something that is for later in life and not for kids. Right. So we have to be ahead of the game. We're in charge. You know, it's kind of, think about it like manners. Like, did you just let your kids run, eat fairly at the dinner table? Did they ever say, Mom, where do I put the napkin? How should I hold my fork? What's the proper way to cut meat?
They don't ask.
Please and thank you. They don't ask, right? So we tell. So this is another thing that we have to tell. So we're in charge, which is awesome, because if we get in the door early, then we get to fill them up with these great facts and our values and help them start exploring their own values and making their own decisions. So like Emma says, when her daughter really wants to date, she'll be really ready to date. Or ready. Right?
I have a funny masturbation story. Not really masturbation, but a friend of mine had a 10-month-old son who was pulling at his penis so much that it was literally red and chafed. So she rushed him to, pediatric, and the nurse there said, "Oh, don't worry about this, honey. This is just a phase. It only lasts 7 decades."
We do have another question coming in about feeling good. So we always talk about teaching girls boundaries, how to say no, how to assert no. How do we teach young girls to say yes and to give consent?
Well, that goes back to my 2 rules, is that, are you doing it? First of all, I'll add to those 2 rules. One is, has there been an expression of feelings? Have you talked about what the sex act will mean to the 2 of you as a couple? Will you be a couple after that? Is this something for fun, etc.? And you're both on the same page with that. And the other piece is that you're not doing it under pressure, either peer pressure because your girlfriends have moved ahead a little faster than you, or boy pressure. Because let me tell you, those guys have a PhD in how to get sex out of a woman who's not ready, or a young woman who's not ready. So they will say so many things to young girls like, well, if I don't get it from you, I'm going to get it from somebody else, or what are you, frigid, cold? So they try to put girls down to make them feel like they're ready, but actually they're not doing it of their own free choice at that point. They're doing it under pressure. So I think that, for me, those are the things I would tell a young girl. Emma, what would you add to that?
How to say yes?
Yeah, how to say yes and when to say
yes.
Well,
I am very curious. I mean, those examples of the guys pressuring women, I think that young girls today are very different than I was. I'm 37 when I was growing up. Like, those lines might have been employed, but these young women are kicking butt. I mean, they really know who they are. They have feminist mothers. They're like the 3rd generation feminists, 3rd wave. I mean, they are having these conversations with the mothers that we are all talking about. Are they really going to have problems expressing their sexuality like we may have?
Oh, yes. you're speaking like a true New York City lady, you know?
I'm from a small town in Illinois. I am not from New York.
Girls will, so the thing that has not changed is the way kids sexually develop. That has not changed. What's changed is the culture we live in. So girls fall for all the old lines. If you loved me, you would do it. You're so beautiful, why not? Hey, everyone else is doing it. Look at this, look at that. Your friend did it. Heard she did it. I've done it with this person. Why won't you do it? Girls will do anything for a guy. Still to this day and age. It does not matter if they have a feminist mama. It does not matter if they are kick-ass. By the time they're kick-ass, they're in their early 20s. Everybody's still rolling out the same way. So it works. Your job, our job with our girls is to be really clear, and with our boys, because it's the boys who are doing the pressuring.
Right.
I mean, the girls need to understand and be able to identify pressuring. Like,
so
what is
what
that
you're talking about is my area of interest, which is evolutionary psychology. You know, from our ancient anthropological roots, let's just face it, men are wired to want sex a little bit more than women. Now, don't look at one anecdotal example of one couple where she wants it way more than he does, but in general in the population, they're wired to spread their seed, and because the risks of pregnancy and childbirth are still physically more are greater for women, women are a little more hesitant about choosing what is going to be the good partner for them, whether it just be a sex partner or whether it be a love partner or someone who they're going to co-parent with. That's basic biology. Sperm chases egg, not in the reverse. However, we happen to be in a high supply sexual economy where the price of sex has dropped from, well, in my generation it was 3 dates, in my grandmother's generation it was 6 months of courtship, and the price of sex today has dropped to the barrel bottom price of one well-worded text. So as a result, things are accelerating faster than they ever had, and that doesn't often give young girls time to get in touch with themselves and their feelings to make the choices for them that feel good. They're responding to the environment, in other words.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's such a challenge. And the good news is that if parents really get on board with talking to kids of both sexes really openly and clearly and talking about consent, I've got this great infographic that I'll send to you that is the new model for consent is yes means yes.
Yeah. Yes means yes. And by the way, I have to add this, and we're getting near the end, aren't we? We have a couple minutes left. But one of the most dangerous things that happens in our culture is girls who use the word no as foreplay, because they're very aware of the sexual double standard that exists. So in wanting to preserve their reputations or seem like a good girl in some way, there is a practice of saying, oh, I probably shouldn't, maybe not tonight, oh, I don't know, no, I don't know, and then, okay, it's on, and they go for it. So as a result, it's training generations of men to ignore the word no, because the last 4 women they had sex with said no 5 times and then did it anyway. So it's really important that we train our boys to ask to hear the word yes. By the way, the NBA does that. They go through sexuality training and dating courses where they're told that you should not have sex with a woman until she says the word yes, actually says it. So I think yes is the new yes. Do you agree?
I think yes has always been the yes.
Yes has always been yes.
Institutionalized for the first time.
Yes.
Right. But no.
That's right. Yeah, it's institutionalized, right? Yeah, that's the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah. But no isn't a yes.
We have one last question coming in regarding technology. How do we navigate this new technical world with Snapchat and KIK, I think it is? How do we teach our girls to navigate this world?
You're going to go there, aren't you, Amy? Because you've already wrapped my finger about Snapchat. Go for it, Amy.
All right, so here's the deal. You need to do an entire show on this because it's so complicated. The bottom line is this. The internet is a place. It's not a thing. So if you would not allow your child to go to the mall by themselves, why would you let them go wander around the wilds of the internet on their own? So the best thing you can do for your kids is talk about the risks of being online, to limit the amount of access they have to humanity, and to use monitoring software. And I am a big fan of being tight and letting out the leash. So I have a 13-year-old boy. He has monitoring software. It's completely open. He can go anywhere he wants on the internet. I'm watching. I get a digest every week. And we know where he goes, and he told me a few months ago that it is really hard having the strictest parents ever. And he hates the monitoring software because we're watching, and so he'll only go to 3 or 4 websites.
What is the monitoring software, by the way?
It's called Custodio, and I'll email it to you because it's a funky spelling. It's $50 a year. You can put it on every single device. And the mistake parents are making is that they think, not my kid. And the reality is that every child's going to be exposed to pornography. Every child's going to make a mistake. Every child's going to do something stupid online. So
did you know if you misspell Dora the Explorer by one letter, you end up with Dora's anal fun?
Oh no, it's sad. It's sad. So our job as parents is to be really mindful of this, and they're super savvy, and we're not so savvy. Most of us. I'm 47. You know, I did not grow up like this.
You were born in a cave. You're a cave woman.
I'm a cave woman. I'm a cave woman. So, bottom line, pay attention to where your kids are going. Do not be afraid to say no. If the rule is you have to be 13 to do something like be on Facebook or whatever, or Twitter or whatever, then that's the rule. When we break those rules with our kids, we're telling them it's okay to break rules. So it also makes it a lot easier when you just say, oh, I'm sorry, it's against the law. It's not. That's the rule.
Yeah, then you got the backup. Ladies, thank you so much for joining my Google Hangout. You can always see us here on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock. Oh, and you guys are up late. You're there on the East Coast. From New York, we have Emma Johnson. From, where are you? Seattle. Amy Lang, you're out here in the West. I'm here in Los Angeles, and Laura Hampikian in Boise, Idaho. Join us every Wednesday night for our Google Hangouts, Wine with Dr. Wendy. Go pour yourself a glass of wine if you haven't had one yet tonight. Good night, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.